Manager Adam Randolph.
All right, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm going to be glancing over my shoulder on occasion here. I'll try to keep talking to the mic as I do that. I wanted to start off by just giving a brief history of the project, and Mr. Harris just did a much more succinct summary of it than I'm going to, but
Would you get that mic closer to?
Yeah, talk right into it.
talk right in. Eat the mic is the advice I've been given before.
Raise it up about 2 inches.
We'll try this and see if that works. So going into the project history, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail than Mr. Harris just did. Starting with really when did the planning for the trail network begin? And the American River Parkway predates 1985, but that's when the Lower American River Task Force formed the American Parkway Plan, which was really kind of a policy-setting document for what they wanted to achieve along the trail. It was, like I said, it's really more policy than plan-related. That kind of changes as time goes on. In 2001, as was pointed out, the Two Rivers Trail Concept Report was created, and that's when the Two Rivers Trail, kind of the trail along the south side of the river, really came into conception when those ideas started spreading. In that concept report, the initial idea for the trail was really to come up from Tiscornia Park up to Sutter's Landing Park. In 2006, phase one of that trail was built, which is that trail going from Tiscornia up to State Route 160. Around that time is when people really started looking into what else we could do, how else this trail or network was going to work. And that's really the time when the idea of the current evolution of the Two Rivers Trail began. When we started looking at the trail coming up along the levee through River Park, or tying into Sac State, tying into the College Greens Trail network. 2008, the Lower American River Task Force met again, and that's when this idea got cemented into place a bit more. They've released an update to the American River Parkway Plan. And this is really the first document, if you go digging through document histories like I did recently, this is the first document where you see that trail defined. And from there it really spread to all the other planning documents within the city and county. In 2012, the city, and I will say slightly before 2012, the city started an effort in seeking funding for that trail portion. In 2012, we received a federal grant, which let us start on the planning work and kind of start doing the homework on the feasibility of a trail through this section. And then there's a big gap there. 2012 to 2016, really that's when we started feeling a lot of pinch from the recession. When we're working on grant funding projects that we do, our design section kind of lags behind, we ride the wave on the recession a little bit, where our project's funding sources last a little bit longer. So in 2012, we were working hard on this trail segment. 2014, we actually had just started a public outreach campaign. And then, unfortunately, everything started getting squeezed tight. We couldn't keep spending funding on planning level projects, and everything got clamped down. So there was a period of time where nobody really heard anything on this trail because we weren't really able to work on this trail. Jump back, 2016 is when that started releasing a little bit. We released another community survey. It went out on Nextdoor. I believe Mr. Harris's office also sent it out. In that survey, we were asking folks about what they would like out of that trail, how they would use it, how many would use it. And that was really being used to secure additional funding so we could get everything we need to build the trail. That was actually a successful effort, which is why we're here today. Funding was secured through that. It actually came through Senate Bill 1 just recently. which means now we are moving forward with the planning process that was put on hold so long ago. We're moving forward with our environmental document. We are moving forward with the initial trail designs. From there, once the environmental document goes out for review, like Mr. Harris said, that'll happen in July, last through August. We'll collect comments. We'll finalize that document at council. Council has to vote on it to approve it. And from there, we'll begin the actual detailed design for the project. So this section of trail, one of the things that we wanted to highlight here is that this is really a portion of a regional trail. One of the big highlights on here is, like I said, this is a portion of the regional trail. It connects the easternmost portions of Sacramento, Sac State, College Greens, into the downtown network. It's not really a destination on the trail so much as just a bridge on the trail. That's not to say that it isn't a benefit to River Park by any means. There are, of course, going to be access points for the residents here. I guess what I want to stress with that is that this really is just access to reach the greater trail networks more than anything. So going into it a little bit, one of the big concerns that we've received is about the trail design. And I'm going to do a fairly big overview here, since we're a little limited on time. But one of the big questions we've had is, why are we cutting this trail at the bottom of the levee? How did the trail get down here? And originally the trail was planned for the top of the levee. It would have been an easier bit of construction, it would have been quicker. That was the plan when we started our documents in 2012. Unfortunately, there are a lot of hurdles that we have to jump through to build a trail around a river. The major one is that we need to work hand in hand with all of our flood control agencies. And recent policies that have been updated or that have come out basically largely since Katrina hit, require enhanced safety for the levees. We have to make sure that we can maintain and patrol them. We have to make sure that we maintain the integrity of those levees. And what that means is specifically American River Flood Control District, who's tasked with maintenance of all of our levees along the American River, can't allow new trails to be built on levee tops. So it forced us to go back to the drawing board and figure out what can we do. Fortunately, there is an option for us to put the trail at the bottom of the levee over the vast majority of the area in River Park. And if you look at a lot of the areas where that would go, there's not really that much challenge to it. This is a picture between Union Pacific Railroad and Caltrans. There's a big wide gravel road down there that allows room for this. This is at Paradise Beach. There is a wide swath down there that allows room for this. Then there's very tight areas. We have solutions to work through these areas, but we recognize that there's challenges here. And this is really what we get into once we get into our detailed design, is how do we best avoid these areas. We talk about a mitigated negative declaration document, which means mitigation for damages that we cause. Our first step is always avoidance rather than mitigation, though. We don't want to have to mitigate. We want to employ as many good design techniques as we can to have as little impact as possible. The other stretch that we need to be covered here is really, what about when there's not a road at the bottom of the levee? What do we do? So this was the biggest question mark for the project, and this is a big scary picture that I want to cover. So you see a trail that looks like it's cutting into the top of the levee. What this is really a trail that is cutting in over the highest level that water can reach in the levee system. And we did a very involved study. We worked with the laundry list of flood enforcement agencies out there: American River Flood Control, Sacramento Area Flood Control District, Central Valley Flood Protection Board, Army Corps of Engineers, and vetted what the best option in this area is. We have actually received approval from all of those agencies for this design. The reason we were able to receive that approval is because this design does not do any damage, does not endanger the levee in any way. So, and I wish we had adjusted lighting here so you can see the pictures a little bit better, but one other feature that I want to point out to this design is when we were looking at a levee trough trail, there was a lot of opposition to the idea of putting more people on top of the levee. Nobody likes folks to be able to look down in their backyards. One of the features of this option is that it's far enough down the opposite side of that levee where when you're on that trail, you can't see over the top. The most you're going to see is the peak of somebody's roof. So when we look at a trail, the standard, what's defined as the preferred cross-section for a trail is generally 16 feet wide. It's about 12 feet of pavement, 6 feet on either side, with 2-foot shoulders. One thing I want to highlight whenever we're talking about a trail like this, though, is it's 12 feet of pavement, but that's not 12 feet of bike lanes. That's 12 feet of pavement. This is a multi-use trail. It is not a bike trail. Everybody is free to use that pavement. Regardless of that, though, we have heard concerns from the neighborhood, and we understand those concerns. Right now, there's a dirt path down there. You're unimpaired. It's not that there aren't any bikes down there right now, but there's a lower amount than there would be with a paved trail. One of the things that we're looking at, and this is going into design inputs, both that we welcome from the community and also design decisions that we can make to try to minimize effects out here. We actually have the ability to reduce the width of that trail. By design standards, a 12-foot paved section is the preferred alternative. An 8-foot paved section is the defined minimum, though. And we can give that to you out here, where we can reduce the width of that paved section. That has a couple of effects for us. One, by reducing widths, it discourages people to ride as fast. That's one of the big concerns that we've heard, is that you're just going to have a peloton of road cyclists jamming down this trail, running everybody off into the woods. You can't do that so easily with a 4-foot wide lane. You can't do that so easily with 8-foot pavement out there. The other benefit of this is it lets us widen the shoulder on one side of the trail. So as well as reducing that paved width, we can give additional room for those who don't want to walk on pavement, for those who want a softer jogging path. So inevitably, we are going to have some impact on natural resources. And again, like I said, our desire is always avoidance over mitigation. We are actively working right now to determine exactly what our impacts are. We're also looking at them, and if any of them seem at all avoidable, we're looking to see what avoidance strategies we could take now, just so we're not trying to throw a giant number in our documents in hopes that we can reduce it later. For your knowledge out here, the 2 real sensitive species that we're looking at are valley elderberry beetles and Swainson's hawks. As part of our environmental document, the mitigated negative declaration will list mitigation measures that we have to take by law for these species. That includes avoiding nesting seasons, that includes keeping certain clearances, it includes only impacting plants that we have pre-approved. With that, I'm going to hand off to Jennifer for a minute to talk about benefits.
Great, thank you, Adam. That's great, thank you. So Jennifer Dublin-Wyatt, Public Works, I'm the Active Transportation Program Specialist, which is a really fancy title for a biking head lady. Handling everything related to walking and biking in the city as much as I possibly can. So I'm going to quickly highlight trail benefits, just so we're all aware of the same page and know what we're talking about. So one, City of Sacramento has done a number of surveys about the community thoughts and what they feel about paved trails, and overwhelmingly, paved trails are something that the city of Sacramento and the residents support. Ask for, we're a city of trails. One of the things that makes Sacramento a great place to live, work, and play, and that's something that I think we all want to celebrate, is how wonderful Sacramento is. Another thing, the benefits of trails are they've been shown to increase property values, and not by a little bit, but by a lot, because it's a desired amenity. So studies show anywhere between 5 and 10%, which you probably can't read up there, but it's 5 to 10% that could go up to, or other studies show 2 to 10%, but we know that they increase home values because, as the National Association of Realtors finds, proximity to trails is the second most important thing that people look at after access to freeways. So this is an important thing that folks look at if anybody's thinking to move, or value their home. Another benefit of trails are the paved trails provide ADA access. It's something that Adam didn't cover as part of his overview on the design, but it's also something that we want to think about. We want to make sure that people of all ages and abilities can see the river, participate, get over the levee and see. And so as part of our trail project, we will be providing ADA or accessible access, so whether you're use a wheelchair, use a walker, you're a mom with a stroller or a dad with a stroller, you'll be able to actually get up and over and use that trail. And then lastly, the other trail benefit is that they've been shown to reduce crime, because when you bring people on the trail, you have more eyes using the facility. And studies have shown that, and I'm going to kick it over to Adam in a second. But one of the things we want to highlight is that it'll make it a safer place for folks to use, it reduces homelessness, and it reduces crime. There you go.
So let's talk safety, since we obviously hit the big red button just now. Reduces homelessness and reduces crime. So what we have done as part of our effort in research specifically for this meeting, and in hearing that, yes, this is the big red button that we're talking about, we've looked at trail networks around the region. We've looked at trail networks specifically in the city, and we've looked for correlations in crime. We've looked to see, do crimes occur more often on a trail? Do crimes occur more often on a paved trail? Do crimes occur more often on less used trails within the city? What I've shown on here is, this is referred to as a heat map. It shows various crimes occurring in various areas within the city. The reason I chose this particular area is because it kind of fit for the context that we're talking about. This is in the South Pocket area. If anybody knows where Garsha Bend Park is. The unique feature here is that there is a paved trail along the Sacramento River, or the levee on the Sacramento River, all the way up to Garsha Bend Park. From there, it is an unpaved trail for the remainder of the pocket, basically up to Zacharias Park. If you see levee houses along the trail on both sides, they're immediately on the trail. There's actually a higher crime rate in the unpaved area, in the less used area, than along the paved trail. In general, in the neighborhood surrounding, there's higher points of crime along the unpaved trail than on the paved trail. Overall, in the neighborhood, there's actually basically equal crime throughout the entire neighborhood. The trail doesn't appear to be a contributing factor one way or another. With that, crime is one concern that's been brought up. Homelessness is another concern. Greg Galliano is our expert to speak to that issue, so I'd like to bring him up to have a few words.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Greg Galliano. I'm the sergeant of the City of Sacramento Police Department Impact Team. So if you haven't heard me speak before, our unit has been around for about 5 years now. We formed in response to the growing concern and the growing homeless population that was developing here in Sacramento. And as we began to form and develop, our agency wanted to find new and better ways to address homelessness, and more responsible and more effective ways to address homelessness. In doing so, we looked nationwide to see what was going on in many other metropolitan areas. And we found that our homeless population and our homeless problem, although much smaller compared to other major metropolitan cities, was a very big issue for our community. What we also found that the way we operated before wasn't necessarily the most effective way. Other jurisdictions were doing a much better job than us. And what they were doing different than us was they were working to find long-term solutions for the people who were homeless themselves, and long-term solutions for the community where homelessness was occurring. So the first part of that, here in Sacramento, we call that compassionate policing and collaborative outreach, where anytime a resident here, or a business owner, or somebody driving through sees a camp, they can report it to us, to the police department or to the impact team, and then we respond out there. Once we respond out, we make contact with the folks and we try and find out what it will take for them to get out of homelessness, right? Because if we just take them to jail for whatever they're doing, if we try and cite or arrest away the problem, they're going to be back within a few hours, right? But if we can try and get them out of homelessness, then there's a win for that individual and there's a win for the community because you're less likely to have someone return. As an agency, we respond to about 37,000 calls for service for homelessness a year, which is substantial, right? As a unit, the impact team, myself, 7 officers plus, we were funded and expanded by our city council to operate 7 days a week to maintain our presence throughout the city much better. We respond to about 6,000 calls for service as a unit, just my team, my small team of officers. With that compassionate policing and that collaborative outreach process, we average roughly around 300 to 400 service provider connections for our homeless population per month, which means that the officers about 300 to 400 times when they contact an individual will actually get that person physically in connection with the service provider to get them out of homelessness, which is pretty substantial. We also average about 6,000 cubic yards of trash and debris cleaned up each year. To give you an example, that's about one F-250 truck bed stacked to the roof with loose trash is 5 cubic yards. So it's quite a bit of work we do already here in Sacramento. I mean, we take your concern very, very seriously. The next side to that, once we do some type of homeless outreach and abatement of the campsite, we try to work with the community, the business owner, or the resident to reduce the issue from occurring again. We call that CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. Anytime we respond to a homeless camp, that's our next step, because we don't want the area to lend to more homeless encampments occurring. One of the major pieces of CPTED is activation. It's getting people out there, using the area, making it more friendly, more inviting, and much more likely to get a lot more eyes on the area. What I have found, so I've been doing this job for about 12 years now. I've been the homeless outreach sergeant for 2 years. What I found is that areas that aren't activated have higher instances of homeless camps. Areas where there aren't people out there using it, there aren't eyes on to get good reporting, we see more camps form. We see them form, become more entrenched, and more difficult to deal with. Or in some areas where no CPTED's possible, where we can't do any type of major changes. And for some reason that environment lends to it. What I found here in River Park, because I drive your levees quite a bit, is you have a very well-activated area. You're very well-activated, meaning you have a lot of people out here all the time, constantly using the space, right? Constantly getting eyes on. Once a camp is seen, we have the ability to respond out and do something. To be honest, throughout, because I cover the entire city, I haven't found that paved trails equal homeless camps. In all honesty and in all seriousness, paved trails don't equal homeless camps. For the most part, it's unactivated areas that equal homeless camps. You have a very activated area. I don't suspect that you would have any large increase in camps because a paved trail is added. Knowing our population, that's not something that attracts or deters them, whether the trails are paved or not. And we have a way to mitigate and respond to these issues once they pop up. Because we've been funded, we were given added funding to operate and maintain our presence 7 days a week as opposed to 4 days a week throughout the entire city and the neighborhoods like River Park. Okay? Did I run out of time?
You're good.
Close. All right, I'll hand it back to Adam. Oh, also, we post our stats. We post our stats online on the police department's website under resources and impact team, and then how to report camps. Just as an example, every month we'll put our stats up there. We hand collect these, not easy, a lot of work, but you can always see what we're doing and what we're up to.
With that, we're going to wrap up our formal presentation right now. I'm going to hand back to the moderator, and of course, we are going to be available for Q&A after the next presentations. Thank you.